Today's episode, we're going to talk about shock loss, especially associated with hair transplant surgery, so stick around. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. One of the things that I do hear about, certainly one of the concerns that people have when they're planning to have a hair transplant procedure is they're worried about the dreaded shock loss. And so I thought it would take a few minutes just to address the concerns that people have about shock loss. It really depends on what you define as shock loss. When we talk about shock loss in the recipient area, is that when we're making the recipient sites or we're implanting the grafts in and amongst existing healthy hairs, there are chances that we can, cause a temporary shedding of some of these hairs. And I want to highlight the fact that this is temporary. So what you can find is that you may notice some loss of the existing hairs, but generally they come back. Now, of course, there's a technical aspect of things as well. And if you're a bit too heavy-handed in inserting the grafts or creating the recipient sites, then you can, in some cases, damage existing healthy hairs. But if the procedure is done well, is done correctly, then there should be minimal shock loss in terms of the existing hair. Now, another thing that people refer to with regards to shock loss is loss of the transplanted grafts. Now, that's normal. All right. What we experience generally is that the transplanted grafts, within the first month, some of them will fall out. That's perfectly normal. But what falls out will come back on the next cycle, which is in about 3 months' time. So why does this happen? Well, when you remove a hair follicle or a graft from the back of the head and transplant it into the front, the actual change in blood supply can switch off that hair follicle, the growth cycle of that hair follicle. So it's a temporary shed. So you do see that happening. But then what's going to happen is in that next growth phase of that hair follicle cycle, that hair is going to come back. Now, like I said, it doesn't happen to all the transplanted follicles. Some of the hair follicles will just carry on growing. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's no rhyme or reason of why it happens to one follicular unit and not as opposed to the other. So if you lose quite a lot of the follicular units after a transplant, it is not a bad sign. Whereas if you keep a lot of the follicular units after your hair transplant, again, it's not a great sign either. What happens is generally some of the hairs will fall out, but they all come back. And there's a sort of predictable course that the growth sort of pattern follows. So you don't see much happening for 3 months, then it starts to come through. At 6 months, 60% will come through. It takes about 10 to 12 months for all the hairs to come through following a hair transplant procedure. So I hope that addresses the concern that some people have. Oh my God, am I going to experience the dreaded shock loss, right? Again, the difference between the healthy hairs and the transplanted hairs. All right, hope you found that useful. Thanks again for watching. See you on the next episode.